Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 361 of the Stacey West podcast. I am your host, Ben. I very nearly forgot to add us both into the video stream just then for a second, hence the panic. And I'm joined by Chris this week. How you doing, mate? You keeping well?
Back again.
Oh, back again.
Yes. I have to an extended absence. Oh, I'm feeling so much better. Yeah, I'm all right, mate. All good. Good to be back. Good to get back in some routine. Yes, I'm well. I'm well now. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I was going to say it's a bit like a first team regular getting injured and then being forced straight back into the starting 11 for multiple games in succession, isn't it?
I'm any other way.
Yeah. I'm pretty good. It was the good lady's birthday yesterday, so we took her away for a spa day at a very bougie spa. My wallet is still crying from the experience. But no, we had a really lovely day away. It's not necessarily my regular scene, but alternating between a hot tub and a sauna for most of the day, peppered with trips to the bar was a way to definitely a good Wednesday.
Doesn't sound too bad for a Wednesday. It's my dad's birthday yesterday as well. So we went out for. My dad doesn't go out very often, so it was nice to take him out for a meal. And I had a brilliant evening. It was just nice to put the world to rights with my old man, but also one lingering symptom from my illness is I'd completely lost my sense of taste and smell, and that was really annoying. That was still lingering. And last night was the first time I could taste anything, and I could taste pie. It was glorious.
Excellent. Well, I mean, if you're going out for a meal, that's the point at which you want it to come back for, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely right. We wouldn't have bothered, like just me and my other half, but because it was my dad's birthday, I wanted to do something special for him. So, you still want to enjoy the experience. But I could taste it as well, and it was amazing. Yeah, it was great.
Beautiful. Yeah, well, I was privileged enough to go for a bit of a sports massage yesterday, and they said to me, like, "What sort of pressure do you want?" And my only response was genuinely yes. Like all of it, please. I think I said to you guys, like it felt like going down the difficulty options in Doom, where it's like hurt me plenty, ultra violence, nightmare. I was like, yes, just give me all of it on my back. And yeah.
I would just like to comment on that because I only saw that conversation in our group chat after I got back from being out with my dad, and I saw Charlie. Like, what's Doom? Like, oh God, he's such a fetus. Oh my God, what's Doom? It's the greatest video games ever created.
Indeed.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about video games as much as I would love to, Ben. We're here to talk about football. What are we going to be talking about today?
Well, today we are obviously talking about the news that season tickets are up for renewal. They are on sale now, are also up for new purchases as well, which we'll talk a little bit about. We're going to be looking ahead to Barnsley. We've also got a clip from the preview that Charlie has done that is currently on YouTube. So we will be talking about Barnsley a little bit later on. And we're going to have something of a presentation from Chris / discussion around some performance that we've seen this season, performance metrics and how we've done, not specifically against the bottom clubs, but in and around that. And then taking from that and saying, do we need a rebuild in the summer? And if so, what do we need to rebuild? So
what I would like to kind of premise this with is it's not actually that statty, by the way, genuinely isn't. It's just something that I think is really interesting. And it massively leads on to what happens next season. I know we're only in February and we're talking about next season now, but let's be honest, we're realistically speaking, we're not going up and we're very unlikely to go down. I know people are saying, well, we're not safe yet and you shouldn't kind of count your chickens until you're mathematically safe. Absolutely right. But if we're taking that mentality, then we're also not mathematically out the playoffs. So realistically speaking, I think we're probably going to be in League One next season, aren't we? So right now, there are maybe some weaknesses or challenges in the squad, and what potentially could be some solutions, or what do we need to add or change for next year. I think it's just a nice open discussion for us to have, really, off the back of maybe some actually quite interesting evidence about this season.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, obviously, if you are still thinking that we could exit the division either way this season. I would suggest that your glass is more than a little half full or a little half empty at that stage. I think it's.
I mean, they're right. We're not safe. Let's not take it for granted.
No, yeah.
But if we're concerned about that, then we have to be equally open to being in the playoffs, and I've written that off already. So realistically, we should probably write off going down as well. As much as it would be nice to be guaranteed to be safe.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you can't rest on the laurels, but I think it is usually 40 points was deemed a decent enough barrier at some stage, and we're on 40.
Yeah, it's probably increased a little bit now. I think 50 is the highest anyone's ever gone down out of League One. So let's not count our chickens, but no, yeah, realistically, we're not a million miles away, are we?
John says, you mean automatics isn't on anymore? I
sorry, mate. Yeah, sorry to be the bearer of bad news there.
Yeah,
probably not.
Might want to just put the champagne in the freezer or in the loft for a little bit longer, so it keeps till next year. But yeah, look, I mean, obviously we're speaking about next season and where we're going to go. But obviously, the big news from the club this week is that the season tickets or gold memberships are indeed out on sale for renewal or new purchases. It was kind of preceded by a message from Clive that was emailed out to everybody, which kind of just outlines a lot of the struggles. I mean, I know how much it irritates people, and I do want to try and get through this episode of the podcast without mentioning the B word. But obviously, there are some constraints in place for clubs such as ourselves, and Clive essentially outlined them pretty well, I think, in his message. So he basically says that the matchday operating costs are currently expected to be around £200,000 a year more next season than they have been this season. Investment in the ownership group continues at unprecedented levels in the club's history. While we may not get every decision right, our unwavering commitment is to keep Lincoln City FC moving forward both on and off the pitch. We are investing in our infrastructure and personnel that we believe will help us remain competitive and maximize our resources in true Lincoln City style. We believe that player trading can help us close the financial gap alongside the commercial growth. However, the harsh reality is that even with this forecasted growth, we're facing an increased annual financial commitment that will require increased support from the investors. So they're basically saying they're going to do it, and we would like to rely on the fans a little bit. We've done it as cleanly as we can, I guess. And essentially they've come around and said the season tickets will be going up by around 5% if you're renewing. So what that means in terms of numbers, if you have a season ticket in the GBM stand, let's have a look. I think it's pretty much everywhere apart from the Rilmac. If you have a season ticket in the GBM stand, your season ticket, if you are renewing, will cost you £419 up until the 5th of April, I believe that is.
So 2 paydays, basically, is the way that works out, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, you have the lowest price deadline is 5 p.m. on the 4th of April. Obviously, there are payment plans available, which they've put in place before, and I think this is a reasonable increase. To be fair. I think the response from a lot of the fans, I know we briefly spoke about it off air. I think you see anything, it's getting increased, and there's usually a bit of resistance to it, or, a bit of pushback, and you go, maybe we won't do quite as well or whatever. But I know there's been a lot of talk about people potentially not renewing, but I think 5% increase, that's what, 20 quid?
Less than £1 a game. I think there's a couple of things to pick up on here. Firstly, Clive's messaging, like, just whenever Clive speaks, you listen, don't you? And I think he just puts things across in such a really measured way. And whenever you see that sort of announcement, as someone, obviously it's semi-public facing, we're a little bit, we have to kind of keep our fingers in the game in regards to just getting a bit of an idea of what the general kind of public and fan response to certain things are. And honestly, I checked all the comments on Facebook and Twitter from the release, and the comments were overwhelmingly positive. And I was actually quite pleasantly surprised by that. And I think that goes to show they've made a good decision. They've now got to put the prices up. Like we all expected a rise. I think it's quite a minimal rise, in all honesty, compared to what it could have been. But I was just really pleased that, it's so much easier to criticize than it is to praise. just generally speaking in life, not just in football. And there has been a few things to criticise, certainly on the pitch in the last little while. So I was just really pleased to see that and it wasn't just like a little bit; it was overwhelmingly positive in the response. So credit to everyone for taking that really well. I'll certainly be renewing. I'll be doing it tomorrow on payday. And yeah, I think less than £1 a game is probably worth it. Like I said last week, we all like to see good football. We all like to be entertained, but I don't go to watch Lincoln City because I expect to be entertained every single game. I go because I love watching Lincoln City play football. I like seeing my friends, like feeling part of something, and supporting my local club. There's more to it, isn't there, than what happens on the pitch. We'll talk about what happens on the pitch in a moment, but I think the value is well and truly there for £20 extra. And a couple of things that came up in the support fan advisory board meeting on Saturday, because this was the main discussion point, of course, knowing it was going to be announced this week. The club were kind of asking our opinion and also just offering some context. To be honest, everything that they mentioned to us, I think, is in the statement from Clive. But what I will say is payment via card is going to be available now. So last year, I think you had to pay by backs if you wanted to do it all in one go. There are the kind of spread out plans if you want to do it in installments still. But if you want to pay it as a one just by card, you can now. So that's just going to be a lot easier, I think, for everyone to just avoid the faff of having to do it via backs like we've had to in the last few years. So an extra benefit, I think, just in terms of quality of life and ease for us in that regard. But I don't know if that was communicated on there directly. So it's worth just letting you guys know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, from, again, the fact they've kept the Real Max standing at 250, I think, is a really good move. They've kept those prices in there. I know there was some mixed emotions around some of them, some of the people that were buying the tickets last season. But yeah, I'm just really, really pleased to see that there are a decent range of prices available for everybody. If you do head out, or if you do leave it until after the 4th of April, the price will go up to £442 if you are in the GBM, down to 419 for the St Andrews. I can never remember what it's called these days.
The Green Link Renewables stand. Yeah, just so in case anyone hasn't seen this, just so you know, and this does apply primarily to match day tickets rather than season tickets, but it does apply to season tickets if you missed unable to purchase in the first window. Is that the stadium is going to be zoned from next season, which means in different parts of the stadium you're going to pay a different price. So all but the first 5 rows in the GBM stand will be effectively like Zone A, like Tier 1, if you like, because it's all undercover. You're not going to have anyone walking in front of you. There's no pillars in the way. Whereas every other stand is either behind the goal, which is deemed as inferior, or has got pillars, or you're likely to have people walking in front of you. So I think it's a way of trying to offer different pricing options, both up and down. Because I think the way it was seen before is that because we had the same price in every single stand, no matter where you sat, our cheapest ticket was actually quite expensive compared to the league. Yet our most expensive ticket was one of the most affordable, because it's the same price across the board, whereas most clubs have different prices at different places. So it just allows the club to offer cheaper options for, and go less than what we're currently paying, but also allows us to offer like slightly extra in areas as well. But for season tickets in that first renewal, you'll not pay any more than Tier 2 at any part of the stadium. So there is a benefit to doing it early if you can, because you just pay the same price as everybody, regardless of where whether you're in like a prime location or not. So yeah, but for match day tickets, particularly as of next season, there will be a different price depending on where you sit in the stadium. It won't be a big difference, but there will be a little difference there. Just bear that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a question here. Says, where do we rank in terms of prices of season tickets? According to some articles, we are already top 3. I can't actually find anything for the upcoming season, mainly because I have literally just started Googling it. And also because a lot of clubs won't have released their prices yet, and there won't be sort of any sort of top to bottom lists.
Looking on that, just to kind of clarify again, Ben, is that first and foremost, lots aren't out yet, but also what I was just mentioning in terms of like quite expensive for as the cheapest price for a season ticket, but also very cheap as the most expensive season ticket compared to everyone else in the league, because everyone else in the league has a range of prices. And then when you see those tables, you don't always get an accurate representation of what the average price is, because they might pick the highest one or the lowest one. So it's difficult to actually rank, because I don't know the answers. Like I said, most aren't out, but I think it's worth bearing in mind that after the first window, we're going to be able to scale it a little bit and to have different pricing options. So I imagine our lowest price is going to be, in line with everybody else, and our highest price is going to be in line with everybody else. We're not going to be massively out of the way of anyone. I wouldn't have thought, but of course we don't know, because most teams haven't released them yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, you're going to have teams like, Wrexham, Birmingham. I say they don't know. We're pretty sure where a couple of those will be playing next season, but teams won't necessarily know what division they're in yet. So we will obviously have to wait a little bit. I'm trying to find a numbered list somewhere of this season's. It seems like we were kind of somewhere sort of probably in the middle, last season. And I think we probably will be again. As you say, it's all going to depend on, who has what level where. Looking at this season's, we've got Shrewsbury's was the most expensive at £525. But
however, that may well be Shrewsbury's most expensive season ticket. They may well have different offers for different groups or in different stands that maybe aren't on that list. So I really would maybe not worry too much about those sort of lists, because they don't always give you the full picture.
Yeah, I mean, it says here that ours was £435 last season. I don't think I paid anywhere near that for mine.
No, renewal price was $399.
Yeah,
it was $435 for new people, I think.
So there we go. But yeah, I mean, look, I think it's a good thing that the club have increased or put a modest increase on it, shall we say. I think everyone understands that things get more expensive as they go on, and it's probably. I don't think the club will have recouped as much as they would have lost, if that makes sense. So obviously the club will be spending more over the course of the season. I don't think they're going to make this up solely in the increase on the season tickets.
Oh no, not
there'll be a massive loss there, or a massive gap there, and I think it's fair play that they've come out and gone, right, we're not going to take the piss. Here is an increase. We're going to have to put an increase on, but we're not going to cover everything. So, what I did find quite interesting though is the buyback or the rebate for games that are moved. If a game gets moved for TV coverage and you can't go, I think that's a decent introduction. I think you've just seen one of the comments, haven't you? You're smiling there, yeah.
Thank you,
to have an option to get a rebate for that game, if you can't go to the rearranged game, I think it's a really good idea. And fair play again to the club for doing it. They didn't have to.
Mm-hmm. Yep, good, good stuff.
So, there we go. So it will be. I can't see the numbers on there, but basically it'll be the cost of a game that you get back on your season ticket. So good stuff. And that is in addition to the buyback scheme that they have for other games as well. So
for sellouts, isn't it? Like it has been, if a game sells out, you can sell your ticket back if you can't go. But that's been in place for a few years. That's staying as well. I think they've tried to cover as many bases as possible, cater for as many people as possible, yet also be realistic with the situation that not just the club is in, but just the country is in kind of at the moment as well. So I suppose have we spoken enough about season tickets? I think that's that really. I want to talk about football.
Yeah. Right then. So obviously, there are some questions doing the rounds at the minute in terms of, are we underperforming, overperforming? I don't think we're overperforming. But how are we performing at the moment, and how does it compare to other things? Where are we? Let's have a quick look. So Harry says, is there an official graph or list for League One club budgets? There is, but we aren't allowed to see it. It is not published by the EFL.
Yes, this is really interesting. So, sorry, I interrupted you there. You go.
No, I was going to say, like, the EFL send it to all the clubs, but they're not allowed to publish it. So the club will know where they are. They're allowed to disclose information pertaining to themselves from that list, but they are not allowed to publish anything else. So, for example, we know that we're 19th. We can't say, oh, well, Shrewsbury are 20th and Birmingham are 18th, bizarrely, like whatever it is. Birmingham are 18th.
Obviously.
No. How on earth can you spread this news, Chris? This is shocking. But yeah, look, the club can't put out information that isn't directly relevant to them. However, they have seen the information and they are allowed to feed back to us. This is where we sit. We've broken the cardinal rule of tonight's podcast. We've said the B word. So let's talk about football, Chris.
Well, the thing is, like, we don't want to just spend talking about budget. You don't want to use budget as an excuse for what's happening on the pitch, because it is still ultimately 11 men running around on the pitch versus another 11 men. And it's human beings playing a sport. It's not in control with money. In that 90 minutes, money is not involved directly. It's people. But obviously, the financial side of the game is a hugely important part. So it's a nice segue, that, Harry. Thank you for the question. So yeah, just to clarify, the clubs don't know this pre-season. It comes out just before Christmas. So basically, they operate however they want to operate with the budgets that they want to set. But you don't actually know where you are in that financial league table until about Christmas time, which is probably why you never heard it mentioned until maybe January, when the club started to reference, hey, by the way, we've got a bottom quartile budget, and now the actual magic number of 19th has been mentioned directly from the club. So so just so you know, we were 12th last year. Our budget was 12th, and we overachieved that by +5. Because we finished 7th in the actual real league table, yet we were 12th in the budget league table. Our budget has gone up this season. We're spending more than we were last season, yet our budget has gone down to 19th. So that's obviously tells its story. Yet, as Clive mentioned in his statement, we still are an ambitious football club. We want to punch upwards. We do eventually still have a desire to get to the Championship eventually. And as much as we can be realistic and, let's be honest, a little bit boring in saying that we were 19th, so anything above that's a good performance. We're currently 13th. We're well above that. Yeah, but being 13th is boring. So let's not pretend that. I know that the club wants to be in 13th in the league, regardless of what our budget is. So the question is, well, why do we play how we play? Why do we do what we do? And what's working, what isn't? And the stuff that isn't working, why is it not working? And how do we fix it in the summer? That's kind of the question here, really. So I suppose the first question is, well, what have teams that have overachieved in the recent past? So those teams that have punched above their weight financially, that have managed to reach the playoffs or get out of the league, what have they done really well? What's made them be able to punch above their weight? And of course, each team is unique. Each team has its own style. But what's quite interesting is a few of these teams, there was a couple of trends that started to be kind of consistent across all of these teams. And in pre-season, and well, not just this season, but the last couple, but specifically since Michael Skubala has been at the club, what the club have been looking at is how can we use our own identity, things that we want to do anyway, like we want to play high intensity and pressing football when we can. But what can we add to that? How can we build our game model in a way that means that we're good at the stuff that other teams who have punched above their weight and done well in the league, that they've done as well? And there was 3 things that were pretty consistent across a lot of these teams that were kind of looked into. Good at set pieces, both in both boxes, so didn't concede that many, and were really good at scoring them. Really good for running metrics, so like distance covered, high intensity sprints, that sort of stuff. Basically, they ran harder than the opposition, generally speaking, as a rule of thumb. And also what was quite consistent is that all of those teams that overachieved did really well in picking up maximum points against the bottom 10 teams in the league. Like they picked up, I don't know the exact numbers, but they were really consistent at beating the teams that on paper they should beat. So I think it's worth bearing in mind that the amount of planning that goes into how we want, and the want is the key word, but how we want to play. It's not just on a whim. And it's not just because Michael Skubala likes it. I think there's a joined up approach that we're doing it for the right reasons, because we want to be successful and we're trying to, borrow elements that have meant other teams in similar situations have been successful in the past. So what bits of that has worked well and which bits haven't? Well, the stuff that has worked well, I think we can all probably agree that from set pieces, we've been really good. A high percentage of our goals have been from set pieces. We've really improved at attacking set pieces from last season. It's actually quite difficult to find running metrics even on Y Scout, like we have. Like it's more of an internal thing. So it's difficult to measure that. But what I will say is that maybe does tell a story in regard to the profile of player that we've signed. Think of the profile of player that we have in our team. What makes up a Lincoln City player? It tends to be players that work hard. They tend to be 6 foot plus on the whole. The physical profile is maybe more of a priority than the technical profile. You can't have both at this level. So we kind of put more cards in that stack than the other. So it's difficult to know, do we run harder than other teams? Do we perform well there? But if you're looking at things that we do have access to, like aerial dual percentage wins, defensive dual percentage, we're doing all right. We are definitely well top half of that. But I think that's kind of like a half a tick, like probably we're doing that. And then the last one is consistently beating the worst teams in the league, the bottom 10 teams in the league. Well, no, we're not doing that, are we? We're not doing that all this season. We mentioned that on Sunday, particularly against the very worst teams in the league, the teams that are in the bottom 4. We've played 6 matches against those 4 teams so far. Won 2. One was the opening day of the season. One was early in the season against Cambridge, which I think was a prime example of how we want to play against those sort of teams. But since then, we haven't picked up a win. So that's clearly the area that we failed in. Ultimately, if we even accept the Crawley game, let's just say, out of those 6 games we've played against those worst teams, we allow the freak result, because freak results happen in football, but the Shrewsbury, Cambridge and Burton games that have been relatively recently, and we've only got 1 point out of them. Let's just imagine we won all 3 of those. We'd be 8 points better off, 2 points off the playoffs, and everyone's really happy with how we're doing. It's beating the bottom teams that we're not very good at. So, before we touch on why might that be, what are you thinking so far? Because I'm conscious I've talked a lot there without any break.
No, it's something that I think we obviously talk about a lot as fans. We say, "Oh, why can't we beat the bottom? Why can't we beat the teams at the bottom?" And when you look at the table, you think, obviously we're going to discuss Saturday, but you look at Tuesday night, for example, coming up, you go, "Oh, Crawley, they're 22nd. Oh, we'll piss that. We should win that." And when you get to this stage in the season, we always say, "Oh, the table's not going to lie." I think based on more recent form than anything else, Burton at the weekend was probably one of those that you think, okay, that's got that they may be in a false position based on their most recent run. Like their early season form completely screwed them. But on the whole, you expect to be beating the teams that are underneath you.
Yeah.
So, it's an interesting question as to why this is seemingly repeatedly happening. But I think that the other question that I see a lot of, and it's something that you mentioned there, the sort of desire to play high intensity football and get press in the right areas and push up and play aggressive and high tempo football. We're not necessarily seeing that at the moment, and it's whether, and I'm sure this is I say I'm sure, I've kind of heard a little bit of what you've got to say, so I am partially leading you onto it, but it's whether the general shift has changed that is preventing us from doing that on a regular basis, or is it that suddenly we don't want to?
Yeah. Have we changed our ideals? Are we doing things differently? Or actually is something else at play here that maybe, you don't want to just completely remove yourself from total blame, because football's dynamic and should change all the time. But is there a reason why all that planning and all those things that have been successful for other teams and in the last few years that have punched above their weight, is there a reason why maybe it hasn't been quite as successful for us this season as we'd hoped? And the answer to that is maybe there are some things actually that are a little bit different than maybe we were expecting. Because, and actually in terms of intensity, we are playing high intensity, high pressing football. Like our PPDA, so that's our passes led per defensive action. Basically, it's a measure of pressing intensity. It's 6th highest in the league. So it's 6th pressiest team, basically, in League One.
I love that way.
So we are now against Burton Albion on Saturday. It wasn't a very high tempo game, but generally speaking, that compared to other League One teams, we are a high intensity team in lots of metrics, loads of different metrics. PPDA against, so how the team does against us, is a good interaction of that. It shows transition rate and stuff like that. Like actually, our games are quite high tempo, generally, not Burton, but generally compared to the rest of League One. So actually, we kind of are. But there's something else at play. Now, this leads me on to maybe, well, why potentially could this be? So part of this is anecdotal, part of it is factual. Now, generally speaking, though, in football, trends tend to filter down from the top down. So stuff that's working at the elite level, if you're a coach in League One and you're thinking, well, this new coach is doing this amazing thing, that's beating everybody in the Champions League. What can I nick from that and apply down here and get an advantage over the teams I'm playing against? In the last sort of 10, 15 years, pretty much Pep Guardiola has been the kind of guru of really changed how football is played, like the style of football, particularly in this country. Prior to Pep Guardiola, English football was not particularly renowned to being possession-based, particularly lower down the pyramid. But it was so dominant for a number of years. Manchester City have been incredibly dominant, playing a very structured, very possession-based style. So it's only natural that managers are going to be influenced by that. The theory, of course, being, well, if we've got the ball, they can't score. And also, if you can almost rehearse certain patterns and keep hold of the ball in certain ways, you're going to go create more chances. Like, it makes sense as to why that became popular. But I think we can all recognize that there's a hell of a lot more teams playing the ball on the deck and keeping hold of the possession in the last 5 years than there have been in the early noughties and in the 90s. Like, That's not a hot take, is it? Now, what's happened this year, and this is a general football trend, but I think explaining it in Premier League terms is probably more relatable for people. Man City have been crap. Effectively, they've been found out a little bit. But because they've been dominant for so long, teams have had a lot more time to find ways of eventually stopping it working. And I think the fact that Manchester City have been well below par this season, in addition to teams like Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth, who play a very, very different style, and they've been so successful with it, I think the rise of that has actually mean that we're starting to see a little bit of a shift away, gradually, of teams relentlessly playing possession-based football. Most teams that are successful tend to be a little bit more adaptable now. Stockport County being a prime example of that, by the way, at our level. And I think what's quite interesting is if you look at the teams that we should be beating, in inverted commas, that are below us in the table, that we expected to be below us in the table at the start of the season. Let's use some of those relegation battling teams that we used earlier: Cambridge, Burton, Crawley. Cambridge had Gary Monk in charge, generally prefers possession-based style, often played out from the back. Burton Albion massively were recruiting for a possession-based style in the summer. Obviously, it didn't work too well, but they were doing that. So if you're a football team like Lincoln City, where you're thinking, okay, we want to play when we can, but we're not going to do it relentlessly, just no matter what. We're going to be adaptable. We're going to be aggressive. Like, we're set up to basically just smother those teams. We're rubbing our hands together when teams want to play out from the back, because that gives us ability to press and do the things that we're good at. And also Crawley won League Two with a frankly ridiculous possession metric. They had something like 70% possession or high 60s in League Two. Scott Lindsay in charge. So teams are getting success from playing that way. Just this season, all three of those teams have completely abandoned that style now mid-season. Which you can't press high if the ball isn't in. If you're just booing it long all the time. I'm not saying it's hoof football, but if you're not playing it around the back and giving teams opportunity to win it back high, well, you can't win it back high then, can you? So that's kind of the anecdotal stuff. I think, well, maybe the style of football is changing a little bit. If it's happening in the Premier League, maybe that filters down like it did with the introduction of possession-based football. Maybe slight less reliance on that is filtering down now as well. And what I looked into, and I think this is really interesting, it kind of maybe proves a couple of these points. The average depth of the defensive line that we're playing against, so basically how high or how low the teams that we're playing against have their defensive line, effectively, how much space is there in behind the teams that we're playing against, that's much deeper than it was last year, particularly when we're at home. Also, the average length of goal kicks by opposition has massively increased. What that really means is fewer teams are playing out from the back against us, and they're going over us instead. Now, we know we haven't necessarily got the technical ability in the squad to be able to break down teams who are in low blocks and maybe trying to match us up from that physical side of things. So I'm not saying that this is an excuse, by the way, but what I'm thinking is quite interesting is there's some general trends here that show that all the things that we were set up to be really, really good against have actually not happened, and we haven't come up against that type of opponent as often as we were expecting to. When we have come up against that type of opponent, we've played really well. A prime example of that, of course, is Peterborough United, who they still relentlessly will rely on playing out from the back, high possession football, high risk football, because if you lose it in those areas, then you get punished. And we punished them. It's a field day for us, rubbing our hands together when you know you're going to play against Peterborough United, because you know how to play against it. Teams at elite level of football are so good out of possession now and know how to stop teams playing out. I think we're starting to see a little bit of a shift in style, because teams that are basically better out of possession than they are in it, which means the pros outweigh the cons the cons outweigh the pros now of maybe playing. Certainly lower down when you haven't got the technical ability to play through teams. So what this basically means is it's not all opposition, as well a little bit, but actually maybe teams are playing differently than we expected to. Also playing differently than they started the season out playing, which has not really played into our hands. So the question is, what the hell do we do about it?
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. It's definitely a conversation that we will have, but we will have it after a break. So if you're listening, we'll have an ad break. You'll hear somebody trying to pitch something to you. If you're watching on YouTube, or Facebook, we'll say hello quickly, and then we will come back shortly. So see you in a minute. And there we go.
There we go.
Hello to all the folks that are watching live. Who have we got? We've got Andy is in, Roy's in, Andy B is in, John Booth is in, Brian Gray is in, Uwe is in, and Harry Jackson is in. Richard Godson is in. Good to see Chris back in harness. Andy said, "Good coaching, shrewd buys and loans, and a lot of luck." I think.
Yeah, I think the last part of that is super important.
Look, yeah,
yeah, everyone needs that if you're going to be successful.
Yep, absolutely. And then John says, "Look at Peterborough, similar model, also struggling this season." I think that's.
I think stylistically on the pitch, there is a big difference with us and Peterborough.
Yeah, I think model is in the player trading model and all the rest of it. But no, I think it's. It's definitely interesting. One thing that we'll obviously come back to it when we come back into the pod, but I found myself watching Aberdeen Celtic in the bar the other night, and to be fair, some unbelievable goals in that game. But it something that you said on the pod the other day really stuck in my head, where it was about the pass dictates everything. Was it the placement of the pass? Pretty much every single pass in that game that I was watching was played 2 or 3 yards in front of its intended recipient. So it was injecting so much extra pace into the game because of just how much more ground they had to cover. I think it ended 5-1, but if you can, definitely try and seek out Celtic's 4th goal. It's just an unbelievable display of passing football. Really, really good stuff. This is actually a really good point. What happens when punching above your weight, you run out of steam? Scunthorpe, it may be boring being mid-table, but it's where we are is realistic. Yeah, it's an absolutely fair comment. It's one that we'll probably actually bring up again when we come back in, because we're going to talk about rebuilding if it's needed. So, right, back in 3, 2, 1. And there we go. That is our ad break for the week. So, Chris, you asked the question, what do we do about it? And I said to you beforehand, is this something that we need to think about in terms of maybe a bit of a rebuild over the summer? Now, obviously, we're very much aware of one confirmed contract that's coming to an end. There are several others that are up in the air. I don't know if there's anything firm that's been said on a couple of them, but the one that we're sure about is that Paudie O'Connor's out of contract. We believe Adam Jackson's out of contract. I think Rico Hackett's also out of contract. Ben House is out of contract, but when his renewal came in, it did say that it is until at least 2025. So it's probably safe to assume that Ben House has an option. So, I mean, there are potentially, again, we don't really know, but that there are potentially options on other players as well. But it seems like, do we rebuild with, or do we even need to rebuild, or do we just realign everybody's vision in terms of what we think we might need to do next season in order to punch above our weight a little bit more?
Yeah, I suppose it's a great question. The answer is don't know, but we can. That's why we're going to discuss it. Is because it's a fun thing to talk about, isn't it? And one thing that I forgot to mention actually in that previous little section is that there's one other difference this season compared to last for us, which is we have not scored in the first 15 minutes anywhere near as frequently as we have last season. That's not a hot take, and everyone knows that probably. But I'm just wondering if those reasons that I mentioned in terms of like defensive line, goal kicks, or just stylistically is a reason why we haven't had the opportunity to do that. So that leads the question then, do you just get better at plan A, or do you actually want to adapt your plan A and or have multiple plans? So to allow that flexibility, do the traits that have allowed teams to punch above their weight in the last 5 years, actually are we seeing a slight changing of the guard? Do those things maybe no longer give as much of an advantage as we thought they would? There have still been some really good performances this season, but I think it's interesting that one of the key criteria for being a successful team in League One, punching above your weight financially, is beating the worst teams, and that's the big thing that we haven't done. How you beat those teams is probably different now than it was a year or two ago. So in terms of squad makeup, does that then mean you need some different profiles of player to then be able to do that? We need to get better at breaking teams down. We're fine against teams that are bigger and better than us that want to play through us. It's the teams that don't want to do that and play over us that we're crap against, really. So
because I think the thing there is, obviously you say about the teams that want to have the possession and want to play through us. It's reflected in the numbers, isn't it? When we've had more possession, we've not got anywhere near as many points. If we've won games this season quite comprehensively with 25, 30% possession. And from an outsider's perspective, I'm part of a group chat with a bunch of Premier League fans, and every so often when Lincoln win, I'll get a screenshot of how the bloody hell did you win this with 23% possession. But is that something that either we need to adapt to being more comfortable with as fans, or is that something where there needs to be more of a middle ground between we're not going to have as much possession, but we know that you like to see us playing the ball on the floor. You like to see your team playing, as opposed to stopping another team playing and hitting them on the counter.
Yeah, it's only a very strange person like me that enjoys watching us without the ball as much as we do when we've got possession of the ball. Like, I'm well aware I'm the outlier there. You want to see a team have the ball. So I think it's a really interesting point, though, and it's a good point. And as much as I always talk about stats quite a bit, obviously, but I think that's always an important point to make, is that no stat on its own really tells the whole story. It's within context. There's always context, and it's always the general trend. But you can't escape the fact that, generally speaking, our points tally is better when we have less of the ball. Partly that might be because of the opposition. Partly it might be because of the profile of those teams a little bit, or where they are in the league and just what you expect from those sort of teams. But ultimately, that is the case. I think, how do we improve is we need to get better with the ball. We need to have more ways of playing through teams rather than just up to them, because we can't break down a low block very well. So you need to have players that are better than that technically. But how would you do that in a way that still means you don't lose the physical kind of profile that we do have? We do have some physical advantages over the teams that we play. The only way that you get both is by spending the money that we don't have. So it's a very interesting discussion. And I have a solution, not a solution. I don't have a direct solution, but I have an opinion on this. And I don't know if everyone will agree, but I'm not expecting you all to. I have seen a bit of criticism recently in terms of us changing formation regularly. And, when it doesn't work very well, you think, well, he doesn't know his best team, doesn't know his best system. When it works, you think, oh, it's a good change. In fact, to the opposition, exploiting weaknesses, results justify the decision either way, don't they? So depending on which of those camps you fit in, you'll either think, no, you need to have plan A that is just you're outstanding at, your bet that is, you were as good as you possibly can be at that, and you'll be better against some teams than others, but you hope you're better against more than you're not. Or you don't really have plan A. You have a couple of principles that you stick by. So we want to be high pressing when we can. We want to try and play at tempo, but everything else is a bit more adaptable. Do you play a back three or a back four? Maybe you can pick and choose depending on your position. Maybe if you have the whole saying of you have two players for every position. But actually, rather than having two like-for-like players, do you have two opposite players? So if let's say we're playing our 3-5-2, we've got a wide 8, so like the Jack Moylan type player, do you say, okay, well, against certain teams, we'll need someone who's really good at carrying the ball in that little pocket, that left side pocket. But actually, against some teams, we need to have more of a ball player that's kind of their passing range is going to help us break it down. So you have two players that could play in the same position, but they actually have different profiles, and you can pick and choose who suits which against different teams. And to be honest, I've been quite influenced by an interview that Not the Top 20 did just this week with Dave Challoner. Now, Dave Challoner is one of the most successful managers in the Football League. I think he's only finished outside the top 6 or 7, so basically playoff or automatic promotions once in his whole career, or something absolutely ridiculous like that. And he was explaining the importance of having flexibility and being able to have players who are capable of playing multiple roles or in multiple styles, or having different types of players in the squad. So you have the ability to mix it up and change, because what that means is you're harder to prepare for. It's harder for the opposition to plan for you because they don't know what they're going to come up against. So I think I'm probably going to subscribe to that as a way of next season. How do we keep what we're good at but add to it? Maybe you don't have two left wing backs that are similar. Maybe you have one that is really attacking. You have one that can cut inside, or one that's a good dribbler, one that's a good passer. Like, maybe you actually mix up your profile of players and expand that a little bit, in the knowledge that some games they're not going to be needed, some games they're going to thrive. If you need to change the approach during the game, you have a more variety of options to be able to change the style of the approach to break down certain teams. I don't know how easy that is in the transfer market. I don't know how easy that is to plan or coach, because you're coaching different, a lot more. I imagine that's going to be a lot more intensive in terms of coaching, because you're not just coaching one style, you're coaching lots of different things. Is the downside?
That should be all right, Chris. We've got 7,000 coaches, apparently.
Well, we've got 3, haven't we? We've got 3 coaches.
I'm being very facetious for obvious reasons.
So yeah, I'll be honest. Maybe it's recency bias, but I've been influenced by this information I found in terms of the game changing, or the opposition, certainly low down up in the league, changing their approach, and it's maybe we've been worse for it. And also just the success of Stockport, albeit they've got the money to be able to do it as well. That they're financially up there in regard to that financial table, but they've got really good value in their squad for the money that they're spending. And on the pitch, taking the money away from it, they're really adaptable. They've got multiple threats, and I think it goes to show how effective that is, because they've maintained their good form even though they lost Louis Barry, who was basically a cheat code. So, yeah, I think my opinion is you mix it up a little bit, Ben. You get a variety of different players and types of players that allow you to play in different ways against different teams. And that way you can keep what you're good at but add to it. But it might mean you have less depth in one certain style, because you can't have everything, can you?
You know what? I can't disagree. I don't know what the answer is, but that seems like a reasonable stab at it. So yeah,
and obviously someone that scores shitloads of goals would always be great.
Well, yes, that's always what we need. I mean, James Collins looks like he's going to be getting a fair few. I think where is it? Andy says pace out wide, creativity in midfield, and 15 to 20 goals a season striker, basically the same as other teams.
Well, there's not many teams have a 15 to 20 goal season striker. I get it, pace and creativity. That's easy to say. It's not necessarily easy to define.
No,
and it's also we've got without losing what we're good at the moment as well. So how do you add to what you've got rather than change it? Is kind of
I mean, some would argue that we have pace and creativity in our squad. It's just in the form of Jack Moylan, who's currently out until the end of the season. It's
so maybe more pace and creativity in the squad.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously other intangibles as well, such as a miracle season where nobody gets injured, or whatever else it is that we need.
Or at least when you get injuries, just make it not all be in the same part of the pitch at the same time. That'd be nice.
That would be lovely. That would be lovely. But yeah, look, I mean, I think that the adjustments of expectations for this season happened internally at a point at which externally people maybe weren't ready to hear it.
I think it was a real shock internally when they saw that financial league table, yet the club don't feel that they've got a squad that's 19th best in the league. The club feel they've got really good value for it. And I know it's interesting because I maybe across the wider fan base, you're right. I would say personally, maybe it was the other way around, because I'd on deep down probably given up on playoffs for much sooner than a few. I didn't always say it publicly, but I kind of thinking realistically it's not going to happen. Yeah, I know that in the January transfer window, the club were recruiting and hoping that they would be able to go on a similar run to last year. And they really, obviously, you want your club to be ambitious, don't you, and positive. But yeah, I certainly feel like realistically now we all know it's going to be a hell of an ask to do it. So it would only take the most eternal of optimists to really genuinely believe that we can do it. So
I think at the start of the season there was genuine optimism there, and I think
100%.
You know, it wasn't just the red and white tinted glasses. Everything's amazing, everything's perfect. You know, those kinds of fans that were thinking, "Oh, we can do this." I think we genuinely thought, "Oh yeah, we can potentially do this." I was anticipating maybe 10th, based on the level of investment that we'd seen from other clubs, even early doors, because I know it was a lot of money was being thrown around, but I don't think anybody necessarily knew quite how much. And particularly hearing that, we had players that we'd agreed to deal with, and they were coming to our training ground, and then the morning of, somebody else rang them and went, "Oh, we'll give you exactly what you were earning in the Championship."
Yeah. And it hurts. It hurts when that happens. Yeah. It really does. And particularly, it's not when teams like Birmingham and Huddersfield do it, but when teams like Bristol Rovers and Burton and Leyton Orient are scooping that, teams that we'd expect to be similar in terms of size and finances, and they're massively blowing us out of the water. That's when it's disappointing. But let's not forget how we signed Sean Raggett.
Yep.
We did it. We've done it in the past. So, you got to, sometimes you reap what you sow, and sometimes you just
payback is a bitch.
Turn around. Yeah, bloody is.
Yeah. Anyway, right. Shall we talk about a game?
Let's.
Because we're 51 minutes in, and we've got to talk about a match. So we're heading to Oakwell on Saturday. Are we going to get a repeat of last year's game away at Oakwell? I think we can all hope and dream. I don't think it's going to happen. But Charlie has been speaking to Josh from Red All Over, and he actually started the conversation off and said to him, what's changed at Barnsley since that result last season. And here is a bit of Charlie's preview.
Yeah, it's been a real. Obviously, that was not a great day for us as such, but I think it started a bit of the writing on the wall for Neil Collins' time. Obviously getting sacked with a game left last season, and then we just sort of scraped into the playoffs. Terrible first leg against Bolton. Second leg, didn't really have anything to lose, so we sort of threw everything at it. Almost made its way to Wembley, but fell just a little bit short. And then that summer, bit of a clear out. A lot of better quality players left out of contract as well, so not really getting anything back from it other than freeing up some wages. And then an okay summer window, Darrell Clarke coming in. Again, I'm not fully sold on Darrell Clarke as a manager. I'm not entirely. It's one of those of, if we're a club that's pushing for top six, I don't see him keeping us in the Championship. So it's almost like a bit of a stopgap for getting someone in more permanently and maybe a little more pragmatic. Summer was okay. Got to a decent start this season. Sort of where we probably expected to be. And then January came. We had a great end to the year, winning 4 in a row. Game moved for the Northampton game that we played last night. Moved from January, and then from then on, we looked absolutely woeful. And obviously, it's seen us slip all the way back down the league, now down in 10th. And now there's a bit of a gap that we've to bridge to even try and get back into that top six. And I just don't see us doing it. The January window was woeful for us. Easily probably the worst in the league, if not probably the worst in the EFL, to be honest. Darrell Clarke not really backed with any signings. We knew we needed at least 2 strikers in. We got Clement Rodriguez, from France, unproven League 2 player from over there. Not really what we're asking. We're crying out for a James Collins type of signing to come in, someone experienced that can come and lead the line and take a little bit of that pressure off Max Waters so far. It never came, and I think we're sort of reaping the lack of investment in January, which has obviously it's turned a little bit. It got a little bit toxic straight after the window. A lot of calls for the board to leave. Which, to be fair, if they're not willing to invest and progress the club, I don't understand why they do.
And there we go. That is a little snippet of the preview. The full thing is on YouTube right now. So, yeah, Barnsley, I think one of the teams that were genuinely holding out a lot of hope for playoff contention this season. I think a lot of people probably had them in their top sixes. It's not really worked out for them. There's obviously been a few unfortunate circumstances with some injuries. But, yeah, I mean, I just, hearing Josh talking there about is, hearing about Barnsley's window, looking through it, they only brought in 4 players. I think 3 of them were on loan and one of them was on a free. Didn't really, as he said, didn't really cover Max Waters, who was out injured and then has since been injured again. I think he came off the bench against Northampton, where they won. So he'll probably start and score on Saturday. But yeah, Chris, what's gone wrong with Barnsley, and can we come away with any sniff of a similar result as last season?
Well, you said earlier, it would be a massive surprise, but it was a massive surprise last season.
Oh yeah,
wasn't it? I think we can win this, and there's a few reasons for it. I'm not going to say we will, because Barnsley do have some good footballers, and I know I'm probably one of the more optimistic Lincoln City fans. Certainly, I think I'm one of the more optimistic of the 4 of us at the Stacey West. There's a couple of reasons for this. And what I will say, just as a general thing, though, like earlier in the season when we were doing so well in terms of league table, there was a lot of clubs there who probably had genuine expectations of getting in the playoffs that had slow starts to the season. Bolton, one of them, Barnsley, one of them, Charlton, just to name a few, Huddersfield. And we were seeing, since our great start, most of those teams that we all expected to be up there this season have started to rise. Barnsley did it. Of course, they've been on a bit of a sticky run over the last 10 games or so. But I think it's interesting that maybe part of our drop down the league table has been the fact that the teams that we expected to be good actually have turned into being much better than they were at the start as well. But Barnsley have not been very good at times this season. They're a bit of a funny old team, really.
Yeah, I was looking into the form table. It seems they're really, really inconsistent. They get a little bit of a run going, and then they completely drop off. I mean, they've had. Where was the? Bear with me. I've got the list of fixtures here. So 2 wins back to back, then a loss and a draw. 3 wins back to back, 2 losses, a win, 2 draws, 2 losses, a win, draw, win. Then a couple of games later, 2 wins, and then a series of defeats, and then 4 wins on the bounce, 3 losses, a draw, 2 losses, and they've just got 2 wins on the bounce. So they are ridiculously unpredictable. I don't know, I think it's probably, as much as some people think we're a Jekyll and Hyde side, with regards to some of the results we've had recently and some of the results that we would have expected to get and haven't got, Barnsley look to be kind of similar, to be honest, in that respect. Not necessarily in any other aspect of the club, but in terms of the results, it seems to be a bit all over the shop.
They're quite similar in lots of ways, actually, on the pitch as well. I just think stylistically, there's actually quite a lot of similarities here. It was difficult for me to find things that really separated the two teams in terms of style, particularly in like passing approach, like in terms of long pass accuracy, long pass percentage, final third entries, defensive, like win percentage of duels was similar. We're just better than them at that. But there's actually a lot of similarities in terms of how do you get from back to front? How do you get to the point where you can create a chance? We're actually really, really similar. Really similar. There is one difference across the season. In Barnsley have created 20 key passes more than we have. So that's a pass that results in a shot. So basically, they get there a similar amount and in a similar way as us, but that final action that leads to a shot is they're a little bit better than us at that. Which is probably the difference in the league table, albeit only marginal in terms of league position. But if we look like 3 or 4 games ago, there would be a much bigger gap between the two of us in terms of league position. So, and that's because they've got good quality, particularly Davis Keeler-Dunn. They're far from a one-man side, but he's a particular danger man. Creates a lot from the front line, takes a lot of shots, Doesn't do a lot out of possession, which is useful. Doesn't do a lot in the air, but is really creative with the ball at his feet. A bit of that kind of wild card player, really, but is a good player up there for them.
Is there an unwritten rule, by the way, sorry, about players with double-barreled names? Is there an unwritten rule that you have to say their full name in commentary?
Yeah.
Because
no one ever calls him Trent Arnold, do they?
No, it's like Trent Alexander-Arnold. And a few years back, there was Keane Lewis Potter at Hull, wasn't there? Whenever he was on in any commentary, it wasn't just Lewis Potter, it was Keane Lewis Potter. And whenever I've seen, Keeler Dunn, it's always been Davis Keeler Dunn. It's not been, just the surname. It's a weird one. It's
a good point. I wonder if there was some data to suggest that. Wouldn't that be fun for us to find out? No, it wouldn't, for sure. So actually, I think stylistically, it's actually going to be quite a similar game here. Now, there's a couple of things that's worth bearing in mind. We are without Paudie O'Connor. He is suspended for 2 games. That's going to limit us, obviously, quite a bit. There's a quirk around Barnsley, though, because there's all these stats and all these stylistic things that they're kind of similar. There's one big difference, though, at Barnsley. You mentioned Jekyll and Hyde. They are the epitome of that in terms of whether they're playing at home or whether they're playing away. So Barnsley have got the 3rd best away record in League One. 31 points from 17 matches played. Very, very good. Home, 19th, sorry. They have the 19th best home record. They've only won 4 of their 16 home fixtures in League One this season. Now, exactly why that is, not really sure. Difficult to tell. But it's very interesting that they are clearly much weaker at home than they were away. They haven't won a home match since they beat Crawley at home 3-0 9 matches ago. So that's quite interesting. So, away from home, we've got the 10th best away record. So the 10th best away record versus the 19th best home record. Actually, maybe that could be a little bit of a leveler for us. I can see quite a tight game, quite a transitional game. The ball's not going to be long periods of possession for either side, I wouldn't have thought. To be honest, it could be 0-0, it could be 4-4. I'm not really sure how to predict this one.
Yeah, I'm just sorry. I'm kind of recovering from what appears to be a weird internet outage. My internet's gone a bit funny during that. I didn't lose any of the audio, but I did lose video for a couple of seconds. But look, I think that there's a lot of, by the sounds of it, there's a lot of discontent at Barnsley around the board and a few other things. They are a club that you would expect to be backing the manager with player signings and all of the rest of it. As much as we talk about some of the former Premier League clubs in our division, let's not forget Barnsley were up there for a few seasons as well. They're a big club, and I don't want to say they've got no right being in this division, but historically they're a much bigger club than the clubs that we're used to playing. What I did find interesting in that moment where I looked and went, oh yeah, that's true. Like, we've only lost to them once since we've been in the same division.
Huh, that's fun.
Yeah, I think once was in the trophy. We beat them.
At the start of this season. Oh, no, it was 2-0, wasn't it? Did we lose? I can't remember.
So we 2022-23, we beat them 1-0 at their place. Obviously, last season we beat them at their place. It was very nice. And then we lost to them at home back in August. And then it was 2-2 last November, or 2023, back then. And then the April of that year, we drew 0-0. So we've only lost to them once, not necessarily beaten them every time, but
yeah,
if you're that kind of, if you lean into your history and all the rest of it, maybe we'll do okay.
I think we've got a chance. I think we can all appreciate it's going to be a tough game, particularly without Paudie O'Connor. Barnsley are a good team with good individuals off the back of back-to-back wins. That's the negative side of it, isn't it? But shall we end it on a positive note, or with a little bit of hope? Because it's more Barnsley than us, but hopefully it's something that we can exploit. Barnsley have only kept 6 clean sheets all season, which is the 4th fewest in the league. And they've created 69 big chances, which is the 7th most in the league, but they've missed 50 of them.
Oh, okay. So they we complain about our ability to finish chances.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'd not realised that. I mean, obviously, there are. We mentioned, Davis Keeler-Dunn, the fact that he's got 12 of their goals this season. We say it every time, but it seems like if you keep him quiet, we've got a decent chance of winning the game.
Yeah, I think so. Keep him quiet. A good away performance from us should give us a positive outcome, I think. Obviously, we need to turn up. But if Barnsley continue to be as inconsistent at home as they have been, and we're the best version of ourselves, which we haven't seen all the time this season, but if we are the best version of ourselves, this isn't a massive mismatch. I don't think. I think we can go into this with a bit of positivity and a little bit of hope, albeit not necessarily expectation, but certainly realistic and well placed hope.
There we go. Well, I think that's probably a good spot to wrap up the Barnsley discussion and indeed the rest of the podcast as I hit my mic stand yet again. I don't think there's anything else that we need to plug. I think Gary has briefly teased well, it is now not a possibility, it is a thing. We will be having a live event of some description in the near future. If you want to get involved with that, check out the Patreon, which is patreon.com/Stacey West, I believe. It's linked on all of the on the pages on the site. As well as that, don't forget to go and sponsor Gary. I know that he will shout at me if I forget to ask you all. Go and sponsor him. He's running the Scunthorpe Half Marathon on Sunday, and then after that, he's going to be continuing with his training. I believe he's doing like really, really well at the minute. He's smashing personal bests all over the place. So
yeah, he's doing incredibly well. I know he does talk about it quite a bit in terms of that he's doing it, but I think while he's not here, we actually can say something nice behind his back. Like, I've known Gary quite a while. It's incredible, the transformation, isn't it? That you've seen in him, just in terms of mentality and how well he's just improving and been so consistent with it. And especially considering he's having a little bit of little bits of a tough time away from football and things, and he's just smashing that side of it. So credit where credit's due. So if you do have a few spare quid, hopefully it goes to a good cause and it sends a positive message, because he deserves it. Like, he genuinely does. He's smashing it. So but that's enough being nice. I feel dirty being nice about him. So let's stop that now.
He's a prick, but he's our prick.
Exactly.
So look, I think go and I mean, if you want, wait until the raffle happens, because I think that's probably where it'll probably get a few more quid. I'd say he'd get a few more out of me, but he said I'm definitely not winning regardless of what happens. So that's annoying. But yeah, look, we will see you guys on Sunday. I'm not sure who it's going to be. It may be me and Chris again. It may be Chris and Charlie. It probably just depends on how bad my hangover is after what promises to be a very good evening on Saturday. But until then, we'll see you next time. That was episode 361. Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.
Hey!